This is Solving the People Puzzle, where we discuss all things talent acquisition and human resource management. Wherever you are in the world, welcome back to another exciting episode here on Solving the People Puzzle. I am so excited to have in studio with me Vuyo. Vuyo, my man, welcome to the Wamly podcast. It is amazing to have you here finally.
Finally. And thank you. It's good to be here.
Super excited to have you here. I must start by saying, are you sure before HR you weren't in radio?
Really, are you going to bring that up now? Never in radio. I'm not looking for any radio gigs. But yeah, no. I'll stay away from radio. Listen, I don't think anyone will listen that long in any event.
That voice, we were at the dinner the other evening and everybody's like, yes, this guy's voice is so incredible. So you obviously you've gotten that many times. No, but all jokes aside, let's introduce you to the audience. I'd love to you share your story.
Awesome. Yeah, so as you've mentioned, Vuyo, I'm one of the heads of HR in the financial services space. Financial services has really been, call it the space that I've operated in through various insurers, banks, and the like thereof. Super passionate about HR, super passionate about talent acquisition. But I think really for me, the big thing that keeps me up at night is that, candidate experience, piece around the work that we do.
Yes.
And the people that we bring into the various businesses, well, the businesses that I've worked in.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about the candidate experience, but before I do, was HR always in your mind as a career? I kind of end up asking all my guests this.
I could probably statistically, 90% of HR people always tell you no.
Yeah.
I suppose that it's partly something that a lot of us stumbled across, through high school, all the career days and career fairs. So HR has always, been this
running
thing
the stand.
That's existed and stand running. And I was like, oh, maybe one day I'll run a stand. And I was like, no, but it probably doesn't pay much. So sports was really the space that I wanted to be in very early on in call it my schooling years. And I realized that you have to be probably the top, call it 1% to really make this thing work. So I played a lot of tennis, did a bit of football and the like. But yeah, I think academically, I did relatively well. But this people thing, I was always problem solving for people and trying to help individuals. And, through the career days, I think the first thing I was told is you should be a social worker. And I was like, me?
Wow.
No, never that, right? But then the humanities space came in. So in my first year, I did a bit of psychology. I think what really threw me off was child psychology. You get to really understand, what goes on in some of the cases that they share. And I was like, definitely not for me. I'll probably end up in tears every day. And that really wasn't the path. And I somehow stumbled upon industrial psychology, chatted to some of the lecturers at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. So I studied in PE. I'm a Pretoria boykie, but studied in Port Elizabeth, which was lovely. I love that city. I stumbled across industrial psychology, and I don't think I ever looked back. Did a lot of HR stuff. Rem and compensation was my thing. And as you'd have it, human beings, are creatures of habit, and a lot of the times creatures of change.
Yeah.
So I moved from rem and compensation to OB to OD. But I think just generally human resources was the career that pulled me towards itself. Yeah.
And I can imagine, Vuyo, over the space of your career, you've seen so many change, right?
I think the profession's evolved. And the profession was evolving before my time. Like many professions, we have to evolve. And I think, if I almost walk the call it HR journey, it was highly administrative, in the beginning, and it's really changed into, we use a lot of this terminology, business partnering.
Yes.
Partnering at a strategic level.
Yes.
And, through the latter part of the little career that I have, I'm still relatively young, it's really been about partnering with businesses to help the bottom line, actually. And I think there's a direct link. A lot of people don't make the link, but there is a direct link to the HR work that we do and how well businesses actually do.
And that's exactly what it's supposed to be. So I'm so glad you bring that up. And, part of the evolvement that I'm seeing, and obviously as Wamly we're in it, is on the technology side. And so you and I both have a passion for technology, and I'd love for us to explore and have a conversation today around that. So maybe my first question to you is, you mentioned candidate experience earlier.
Yeah.
Like, how do you marry the evolvement of technology while considering candidate experience, in your opinion? Like, what have you seen? What have you experienced? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think those two should be linked as much as HRBP and strategic partnering is now linked with HR.
Well, powerful question that. Look, I think if we start with the tech, I suppose, piece, if I look at majority of the, call it human resources information systems that exist, no particular one, right?
Yeah.
So it's really just a general observation. When a lot of these systems were created, they were typically created to deal with the finance piece in the business, right? So you've got these clever tech minds who are able to build systems, but the customer or the client was typically from a payroll finance perspective.
Yes.
So built for purpose, extremely good systems. I think through some of the ones that I've been exposed to, brilliant, right? For that purpose.
Yeah.
However, the challenge that you sit with is a lot of the time the candidate experience piece falls to the waist. And I think really the direction that we're all moving to is focusing on the candidate experience. I mean, if you look at you know, the call it the environment around, you know, employment. Yes, we've got high unemployment rates.
Yeah.
But there also is I call it the group of call it passive job seekers, right?
Yes.
So the guys that are really employed, doing
Not
well,
really in the market,
not really in the market.
looking.
And one of the I think one of the challenges that you sometimes sit with is that sometimes these systems can actually have a negative impact on passive seekers. Once you get them to bite, and you know you're sitting in front of them like you and I are, and there's, you know, stuff that the person needs to upload, CVs and the like thereof, and the system just doesn't give the candidate joy. It can become a barrier to bringing these individuals on board, right? So I think really the crux of it all is, I think there's going to be a shift, and not to be a mini Nostradamus here, but
Go for it.
really the with a lot of the investment in AI and where we're actually going, we do run a risk of building very gimmicky type of systems, right? So all the bells and whistles, however, it doesn't deal with the actual candidate need.
Sure.
Which is connection, which is about purpose, which is about relating to this brand. You know, some of the things I sometimes, or that keep me up at night is how do I reach the candidates that you can't reach?
Yes.
Through, not so much the HRIS systems, you know, broadly speaking, but your ATS systems and how those are set up. How do we use those to get access to people that we typically wouldn't get access to? How do we speed up, you know, the talent acquisition process, so that, you know, and it's a blue sky thinking here.
No, yeah.
We chat today, all my background checks are done tomorrow, and I've got a job offer the following
The day thereafter. Right. What a dream. But let's backtrack a bit, because the golden nuggets you're dropping now, I mean, it's let's unpack them. So firstly, is it fair for me to say that I'm hearing you say that some of the systems and the technology out there isn't flexible enough? And if you agree, can you maybe double click on that?
Yeah. Flexibility, a big challenge. So again, going back to the history of how they created, they were never built for that purpose of being flexible. They were built to deal with ledgers and the like thereof, right? So
accurate payroll on time,
which is important stuff, right? Highly important stuff. But the flexibility aspect, you know, does get compromised when you do that.
Yeah.
Because you're taking a system that was built for a specific purpose, and all we're doing is adding on. We're plugging on. We're attaching stacks onto a system that actually isn't designed to do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
So the flexibility component becomes a little bit tricky. What you also then find is, you know, if you partner with very big firms that you know build some of this tech, for you to have a bespoke solution,
customization becomes
a challenge. And I think, again, maybe another Nostradamus or Vuyo moment is what you'll probably see in terms of direction, a lot of business will partner with your smaller niche
Yes.
businesses who are able to really create something that makes sense for that brand, for that business.
That's bespoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there, because what we see regularly is a lot of our clients have multiple systems that they try and fit together like a puzzle. And again, you have to also look at it from the perspective of the design of the system to say, I wasn't built for this, or I didn't have this part in mind. But it doesn't remove the need from the client to want to do it, because you've got a business outcome in mind, and that's time to hire and great candidate experience. So that's super interesting. I love your Nostradamus moments, by the way. We didn't talk about you dropping these nuggets. I might talk to the producers to call this podcast episode Vuyo the Nostradamus of 2025 HR. But I like your second one around this idea and concept, or I think it was the first one, around speed. Because when you're a passive talent or a non-active job seeker, when I do then grab your attention, it can't be a boring administrative long process.
No, and you've got
because I'm not desperate.
And you got it for a very short period of time.
And probably multiple Vuyos are looking for Johnny, right? And interacting with him. So from the candidate's perspective, like you did touch on a couple of things, but how do you foresee, and in your daily interactions now and with talent acquisition, what is important for candidates?
So I think, again, speed is important for candidates, whether passive or individuals that are actively looking, right? I think that process of, I've now applied for the role, when would I get feedback? How do I get feedback? Candidates already start asking themselves that question. And I think the other most important part is feedback.
Yeah.
You'd be quite surprised at, the level at which, even recruitment agencies, to some extent, they'll bring you along this journey, you'll hype you up about the company. And unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes the candidates that you decline are potentially your next customer.
Sure.
Right. So again, I talk a lot about the idea of not treating candidates as job seekers, but as customers. Because they're actually a customer to this process, right?
And potentially even your business's product.
Correct.
Yeah.
More often than not.
So
that piece is very important. So whether the candidate's successful or not, there has to be some sort of feedback loop that gets closed, right? I think another important thing is engagement up front. So, you've got this brand, but how do you connect me to the brand? So having a proper talent acquisition strategy, there's a lot that goes into these things, but proper talent acquisition strategies, how do you bring the brand to the individual? How do you connect with that individual that you can't actually reach?
Yeah.
So hypothetically, and something that, I ask myself is, for example, WhatsApp. There's very little use of it. But
the most used communication tool in the world.
Exactly. From a comms perspective.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the talent acquisition perspective,
how do we leverage?
How do we bring that closer?
Love it.
Because that's how people are communicating.
Yeah.
And again, it takes me back to this, putting the candidate at the center, this idea of treating them like a customer. We do it very well when we want business.
Yeah.
When companies want business, you'll be able to access them through any means and form.
Yeah.
But again, we sometimes forget that candidate is actually the customer. So those are some of the things: communication, obviously, feedback throughout the process, being able to almost get a sense of where you are in the recruitment process. Yes, the human component will never go away. That continuous engagement. Yeah. But I mean, using things like some of the AI tools, some of the bot type work to notify candidates
Absolutely.
that, hey, we've reviewed your CV. This is where we actually at.
Yeah.
Do you have questions?
Yeah.
That level of engagement
Yeah.
is probably what will set a lot of the good guys apart, right?
You know what I love? So I'm hearing 4 things: feedback, engagement, collaboration, treating the employee, the potential employee, as a customer. But what pulls all of this together is, I've seen that it's often not that the candidate wants to know if they're successful or not. Just they want to know where they are.
in the process.
Where am I in the process? People say, and I mean, obviously, imagine in a world where you can within 3 days appoint, right? But candidates will more often than not worry less about this took a week or two if you were in regular communication with me.
Exactly.
The trick, some of our listeners will now say, "Yo, Vuyo, but I'm dealing with hundreds or thousands of candidates." And my answer and response, and I'd love to hear yours to that, is that's where the technology and the AI comes in.
We're aligned.
You can do that at scale if the technology is bespoke and it allows you to do it in a way that delivers your brand and your EVP and makes that candidate feel the organization's DNA already in a way that it doesn't have to be a telephone call, but as you rightfully said, a WhatsApp. You know, what we do here at Wamly is we have WhatsApps in the hiring process through our technology with videos. So there'll be a video of Vuyo, right? And I submit when I apply, immediately I get a WhatsApp from you with your video saying, "Fran, thank you so much for your application. This is the process, 30 seconds. And now the candidate's like, wow, that was fast. It was personal. And I know what's coming, you know? So no, I think that's fantastic, Vuyo. I think the other question I have for you around this conversation as well is, if a listener is listening now going, we need this, right? And I'm not referring to a specific piece of technology, but more you spoke about a talent acquisition strategy earlier. What would your guidance or advice be to them around how to craft a strategy? Because you can plug in as many systems as you want, but if there isn't a strategy guiding the buying process and looking at what you actually need, because unfortunately we know that so many organizations acquire platforms or systems or technology without really thinking about the strategy. So if they want to start, where do they start with the strategy?
I'll probably give you a very simple answer to this. Without going into strategy. But I think with all the tech that we've got available right now, and like I spoke about some of the risks of just stacking and doing all sorts to in some instances, archaic systems, I've always said you need to clearly define what you're solving for. You see, where there's a lot of options and almost this bouquet and buffet of products that you get access to, it becomes very easy to lose yourself in developing a strategy that you might not be able to live up to, or doesn't solve for an actual problem.
Sure.
So I think the big task that HR professionals will have going forward is, and I think I know what mine is, right?
Yeah.
It's
do you mind sharing like a one-liner?
Well, it's really simple. Put the client at the center. So really, at this point, anyone that I engage with, if I get a sense that the offering is not bespoke or not able to be flexible, then it's going to be difficult to work together. A perfect example of partnering is Wamly and myself and the team.
Yeah.
From I suppose day one, there's been this element of flexibility, this element of customization that's quite clear. I don't know if it's intentional, but I always get the sense when we engage that you're able to solve for X. And really, for me, the ask for HR professionals and business owners is you need to be very clear on what you're solving for.
I love that.
So if candidate experience is what you're solving for, you need to build around that. And at any point when you engage, when you develop new processes, you need to ask yourself that question: is the candidate really at the center of what we're doing or not?
Yeah.
And that's really my advice.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Start with the problem that you're trying to solve for.
for.
What do you think are common talent acquisition problems in this day and age? Candidate experience, 100% agree with you. Like what other problems do you think are floating out there?
Many candidate experience, talent attraction in itself.
Yes, where to find.
Where do I find these individuals? Data is always a big one. And again, for me, that's where platforms like Wamly actually help in terms of getting proper, accurate data, so that you can make those hiring decisions, so that you can know where to find the talent, and answer some of those questions.
Time to hire.
That'll be an age-old one. I think
it's always been around. It'll remain one.
It'll remain there, and also just this competitive, market. And that's the thing, I suppose, with the narrative in SA. Yes, high unemployment rates, but there really is a war for talent, right?
Absolutely.
And it's actually global. So a lot of your best talent, it's not just within the confines of South Africa that people are looking.
And South Africans can now work abroad because of remote policies.
Exactly. So how do I attract you? That's sitting over there, that's potentially the best in the business, who is being eyed out by all sorts of different companies, and how do I make that attractive? So a big part of it is also that employer branding piece.
Yeah. Attracting talent really is the number one problem that so many organizations are dealing with at this very moment. If you are bored and frustrated with the way at which your organization is attracting talent, head over to wamly.io and explore how we are attracting talent using future-focused, innovative, technology-driven solutions to bring in passive talent.
The key with human resources and the profession that we're in, all these components are interlinked, right?
100%.
And you should never look at them in isolation. So when you work on the talent attraction piece, right, you've now brought this talent into the business.
Yeah.
But now how do you keep them?
Yes.
And again,
talent management and retention must be linked.
That retention piece. And I always say you actually start retaining from before the person starts. It's reselling that brand. It's getting a person to really understand what you're about. What is this business actually about? Phenomenal companies, around the country that do an excellent job at that. But the key is it's intentional.
Yes.
You can't, fall on, like I said, with my career. You're not gonna.
It's not accidental.
It's not
anymore.
accidental.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not gonna just land on a beautiful strategy. It's really about being intentional, solving for X, being very clear what X is, and working from there.
This piece that you're talking about now, I'm so passionate about, because I often get asked, like, what is the difference between like organizations that implement our system well and organizations that don't? And it will definitely apply to any piece of technology, whether this is finance tech, HR tech, whatever the case might be. And the intention around solving for a problem by understanding it, one. And then two, having senior management, exco senior management, heads of departments buy into your initiatives, your roadmap, your vision of how do I go about finding whatever I need to be able to solve it, so that it's a top-down approach funneled into the business partners, the recruitment officers, talent acquisition, or whatever department is using the technology. And then everybody, through good, clear communication, understanding the why. You agree with that?
Definitely. Yeah, leader-led solutions, right?
That's it.
Getting buy-in, all these things that you're mentioning are what, and it's not just specific to ATS systems. Any tech that you 100%. Implement, you need to really understand what the why is, and the how.
Yeah.
All those important questions. And that normally makes for a far better implementation. Not always successful,
but at least there's some thinking.
But a far better implementation than not answering the questions in the room and getting the necessary buy-in that you'd need.
That's it. I'm going to throw you a curveball before we end.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. The curveball is,
let's hear this.
You triggered me earlier with a word that I'm deeply passionate about, and that's EVP and brand.
All right.
Okay. Can you help the listeners understand from your perspective, what is that for you? So it's not a textbook answer. What is it for you, and why does it matter?
Now, that is a bit of a curveball one.
It's a pleasure.
I'm thinking tech here in my head. But I really do think brand and EVP more often than not are interlinked, and the words are used interchangeably. I think EVP is very specific to the employee.
Yes.
Brand could really be looked at from the perspective of a client or an employee.
Yeah.
But what it really is to me is it's the promise, right? What promise are you putting
That's good.
To the public, this client, to the client, the candidate, or to your employee who's equally a client. And that's really all it is.
Wow.
EVP for me has never, and I think we went through a bit of a time in HR where EVP became very gimmicky.
Very a buzzword.
And it was a buzzword, and we threw different solutions at it and hoped that was the EVP. But it's really the promise and honoring that promise. So if this culture, the organizational culture is the promise, then it's living by that, right? And yes, there'll always be supporting things like dealing with wellness and the initiatives that we bring in there, rewards and recognition, all the components that kind of make up EVP exist, but on their own, they're not actually EVP, right? It really becomes EVP when it becomes a promise, a commitment from a business, and how that business executes.
I love that. I often look at EVP and brand, and then people ask me to link technology back to that. And then I say, the technology is your vehicle to communicate the promise. It's not where the promise gets designed.
Very true.
That gets designed in the DNA and the heartbeat of the organization, driven by the leadership, seen by the current employees, experienced and spoken about and talked about and often bragged about or complained about by the current staff and employees. Yeah. And then you have your technology that supports that through messaging and experience, to whether it's your recruitment system or it's your onboarding system or it's your succession system or even your performance management system. Is that promise well and alive and true during the journey? I love that. It's the promise. Vuyo, what are we going to leave the listeners with? Parting thoughts?
Really, if I don't have any more Nostradamus.
Oh, okay. So there's not a third.
No, there's no last one there for you. But I really think just the piece around solving for X, and I know we've been chatting about tech and a lot of the conversation has been about that and the employee, but really that question that you asked, just around the strategy piece. HR going forward is going to have to be very clear in how it articulates, or firstly understands what it's solving for, and then clearly articulating that well.
That's good.
Especially in you see it with things like your ChatGPTs and the like thereof. What you input into that thing is crucial
100%.
to the information that you're going to get out. Right?
100%.
And I think with all of the possibilities that we're sitting with all the different tech stacks or stacks that are out there, really we're at a stage where we're going to have very clearly defined strategies. We're going to have to be very intentional about what we're trying to do. And that really speaks to that concept that you mentioned around understanding what X is, understanding what you're solving for and what the problem actually is.
Yeah.
And that's really, I suppose, the piece that I can leave the listeners to.
Well, wisdom. You know what, if I can add to that, or just agree with you, is if you don't start with your strategy and your why, all the technology around you will overwhelm and confuse you. I actually last night saw a post, 123 million people yesterday went on ChatGPT. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's millions. And I wonder if all of them knew why, or if they were just playing. And maybe, so it links back to, yes, you can feel overwhelmed. Yes, you can be, and then you either freeze, flight, or fight, right? So that's the human response to it. Like, I'm either going to engage with it or ignore it. But if you start with your why, what problem am I trying to solve? Then all of a sudden it's easy to differentiate between what is fit for purpose, what's bespoke, what can work for me, and deliver the promise on the problem I'm trying to solve for.
Brilliant.
Vuyo,
yeah,
it's been such a pleasure.
It has.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.
No,
and I can't wait to share this episode with the listeners.
Well, it should be good. I hope I've imparted something to the people. But yeah, keep doing the work that you do. I think maybe just a message to you and yeah, man. I'm excited about all the moonshots that you're going to achieve with this business. I really am, and I can see it happening soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening to Solving the People Puzzle. If you enjoyed today's episode, can you please go and like, subscribe, and even leave us a 5-star rating? If you have any questions around how to create the ultimate end-to-end hiring solution, head over to wamly.io so that we can help you hire better people faster. Catch you next time.